Welcome to the Boosting Achievement ESL podcast. I'm Dr. Carol Selva. This is episode 103. We don't usually do a video, but I'm giving a video because I'm going to show a lot of examples of engagement and motivation for newcomer students. And I'm talking specifically about SLIFE, students with limited or interrupted formal education. So I am using the work of Dr. Lora Beth Escalante, who wrote Motivating ELLs, and Daniel Pink, who wrote Drive, and Larry Ferlazzo, who has written several articles on how to support students to find their own motivation. He and Katie Holsenepsky have written many books on supporting English learners and supporting students in general. So I'm going to be following one of his articles that talks about 4 things that support engagement and motivation. And he's talking about students in general. I'm doing a laser focus on the newcomer classroom and students who might not have literacy in their native language. I recorded this earlier in the winter break as a direct response to teachers that I work with on an ongoing basis. And again, we have over 100 episodes for other things that you might have questions about. But I'm doing this show right now because we're still in the middle of the pandemic, and there are so many things that are going to be so challenging for teachers in this next semester. So we don't need to make anything harder than it needs to be. So those 4 things that we're going to focus on are relatedness, relevancy, competence, and autonomy. Those are the 4 things that if you put those in your environment, you should see more motivation, according to research. Now, the rest of this show is going to give examples. It's going to break down each one of those and give examples with students with interrupted education in mind. So you'll probably want links to everything that I'm talking about and the resources that I shared, and you can always find those. They're always in the same place. Type into your browser, all in capital letters, bit.ly/BA podcast, all in capital letters, and you're looking for episode 103. Okay, so you're going to see a wardrobe change from me because I actually recorded this at the end of the first semester a few weeks back. All right, let's get into it. So let's focus on motivation. If you are thinking, but how are they supposed to ever catch up? How are they supposed to be able to become literate? We have shows for that. We have shows on how you teach someone how to read, how you get buy-in from the students on the things to help kids get literacy off the ground as fast as possible. I'm not here also, I just want to mention that about literacy, because I am going to talk a lot today about reading and how reading is the key. I'm quoting Stephen Krashen when I tell you that the more they read, the more language they acquire, the more English they acquire. Free voluntary reading is the answer. And what I've seen effective is when the student understands what's happening, it goes even faster. But it does have to do with how much they do of it. Think about that. Think about engagement and motivation for whatever. Like I said, I'm not here to argue. Should it be the balanced literacy when we're teaching kids how to read, or whole language, or phonics instruction only, or the science of reading? I've seen all of that work. I've seen all of those things work. But the conditions where it works best for students that have interruptions or they're underschooled is when they're motivated, engaged, and doing more of it. They're in print more. We have so much technology that will help a student read. We'll read to the students. And if their eyes are going across the text, they're starting to get multiple exposures, even to high frequency words. It's super important. But they have to be engaged. They have to be motivated. They have to want to do it. They have to want to do whatever it is that you're doing in your classroom. And that is what, and without us, when we're not there, when they leave our classroom, the students that go the fastest don't stop learning about, they have the awareness of what's going on and they're doing it wherever they go. So let's focus on motivation today in direct response to what educators are telling me. If we focus on motivation, if we have a lot of students that are motivated, most of them are motivated, our jobs become so much easier. And we can show them things that are not that hard to do so that their journey becomes not that difficult as well. All right, so that's what I'm hearing from teachers. I'm struggling with engagement. Well, we do have solutions for that. I have a video, episode 26, where I show a student in my classroom who fell asleep in the middle of one of my lessons. And then I reflected on that because I had videotaped the lesson, and you can see the kid putting his head down and everything. And so then the next day, what I realized was he was actually too high for what I was doing. And so the differentiation piece would have been to have him talking. So I come back the next day and I let the kids talk. I did the same lesson, and you would think they would be less engaged, but I let the students talk more. I make it more student centered, and that student is super engaged, even though he's higher than the other students because he has things to contribute. See, what I'm learning from that, it seems obvious, but when you're teaching, not a lot is obvious in the moment. All of this requires reflection for me. So it's not the student. It's never the kid. It's always instruction. And what I noticed there is the student didn't change, the conditions changed. So researchers agree on how to help students find their motivation. There's good news and bad news when it comes to motivation. So I do want to say that I am learning so much from Dr. Lora Beth Escalante. She wrote a book, Motivating ELLs. I'm learning so much from Larry Ferlazzo. In fact, I'm following one of his articles where he quotes many researchers, but these folks are all saying the same things. What are the conditions to help students find their motivation? So I will, in the show notes, link to many, many articles by Larry Ferlazzo and the books that he's written about helping students grow their intrinsic motivation, their own motivation. And I'll give you a link to Dr. Lora Beth Escalante's book, More Motivating ELLs, which is great also. But I want to tell you some good news and bad news when it comes to motivation. There's more good news than bad news. The bad news is that we can't motivate someone. You can and you can't. What I mean by that is you can't demand motivation and expect to get it. Or you can put a carrot out there and say, okay, we're going to have a party if you guys all do this. That's not intrinsic motivation. I can't make you be intrinsically motivated because I'm telling you to do it. So you can't make someone be motivated, or you could bottle that. You could make me stick to my diet. Just make me. But you could create conditions where I could find my motivation. We can all create conditions where motivation grows. So Ken Robinson, the late Ken Robinson, Sir Ken Robinson, so great. In one of his TED Talks, he talks about teachers being more like gardeners. We're not really filling empty vessels with knowledge. We're fostering growth. We're guiding. We're helping things grow. So think about a real garden. A real garden, you can put all the seeds in there and you will have a lot of growth. You will have a lot of plants grow with the right conditions. You would have to make sure that the conditions were right for optimal growth. Sunshine, water, good soil. You can have most of those plants grow, in the right conditions. There might be one plant that doesn't. Something's going on with that plant. It's okay. We're not going to give up on that plant. We're still going to have those conditions. It might just be a late bloomer. So what are the conditions that we need if we want motivation to grow? And I'm telling you, when I focused on motivation, it had a bigger effect than the actual strategies that I was using, because when I first started working with students that had interruptions in education, I didn't know how to teach someone how to read. I didn't know all the things that I know right now. But some kids were growing. Once they became motivated, once they were intrinsically motivated, I couldn't stop them from learning. They were learning when I wasn't around. They were walking around the school using their English. They were reading when they were riding in a car. They were looking at street signs and billboards and recognizing things. And they they did things without me making them. You have to make anybody do things when they are intrinsically motivated. So it's definitely worth focusing on for whatever you're doing. Let's focus on motivation. I am going to talk a lot about reading. It breaks my heart that people say free voluntary reading is not for our new arrival students. That can't be right. Of course it is. It's the answer. We have so many ways for students to be able to read with assistance, with technology, with me, with a buddy. But they have to have some of these conditions to stay in the print, to be in the print. And we need to remember, we need to self-talk like a mantra and remember there is nothing wrong with a child who has missed formal education. And there's nothing wrong with a child who doesn't have my language. That is not a disability. What I mean by that, per se, what I mean by that is it's not a cognitive issue. A lot of these students have been through very difficult circumstances, or they would have been in school. So if they've missed formal education, often they've gone through something traumatic or something difficult. So I'm not saying they don't have challenges. Of course they have challenges. What I'm telling you is there is research that when you include students into the mainstream, when you take care of their basic needs, and one of those is belonging, I'm quoting Eileen Winokur, that sense of belonging, Maslow told us a long time ago, it's a basic need. And there is research by Claudius, 2018, that immigrants who are accepted into the mainstream and feel that social connectedness, it can offset the negative effects of post-traumatic stress. So I quoted that in my doctoral work. What can we do to support learning and acculturation of these students and valuing what they bring, helping them feel part of our classes, holding them in high regard? All of those were strong themes. So I am going to talk about reading, but I'm not ignoring the fact that many of the students that I'm talking about can't read in their native language. But let's look at what these conditions are. And then think about your most marginalized student, your student who's not engaged. Again, they may be we don't know what they're going through right now. So the first thing we're going to talk about is relationships. And that's where we get to know which kids need more than other students. But we're going to be talking about the overall conditions of the classroom in our lessons. All of this is research-based. And so in today's show notes, you will find links to all of the things that I'm referencing. So let me tell you what the 4 things are that support students finding their own motivation. It helps students find their own motivation and become intrinsically motivated. They are relatedness, relevancy, competence, and autonomy. Those are the 4 things that help students find their motivation. If we focus on those, there are other things we can do, but again, we're trying to get our biggest bang for our buck. And when we consider students who are not engaged, those are the 4 things that I look at. Do I have those conditions for that child? Do I have those conditions in this lesson and in this classroom? And if not, that might be why that child is not motivated to do the thing. So let's break each one down. And I'm showing high school and middle school students. I'm always talking about my high school and middle school students who don't have help at home, who have come from difficult circumstances, who don't have native language literacy, and they are finding success. They're becoming more successful than some students born here, absolutely becoming literate and successful. But these were the conditions that helped them find their motivation. All right, so let's break them down. The first one that we're going to talk about is relatedness. And when we talk about relatedness, what we're talking about is relationships. So relationships, you're not going to find teachers who don't believe that relationships are important. Brand new teachers are sick of hearing us say relationships. But let's talk about what I mean by relatedness and relationships. Absolutely between me and the child. We have to look at our most marginalized students and remind ourselves that they bring gifts, that they bring assets. It's hard to see that because it looks like a disability when they can't speak my language, when they maybe are just learning how to print and they're older students. We have to remind ourselves that it's a lack of opportunity with these students. If they don't have my language or they don't have the literacy because they've missed out on education, it is not that they need remediation. They might need intervention, but that could come after school, tutorials, summer school, things like that. A club where they get peer tutoring, that kind of thing. It's not, for the most part, it is not that someone tried to teach them to read all these years and they have difficulty learning. That's where remediation comes in. This is just lack of opportunity. So how do we give them more opportunities? But we need to be thinking that way. So when I talk about relatedness, that is, how does the student feel that they are regarded? Do they feel like people, when they come into our classrooms, do they feel respected? So I'm talking about the relationships between the students and each other, the students and the rest of the school, their family and the community, definitely me and them. And again, I keep talking about the doctoral research that I did. I just finished what helps these students persist through graduation. We interviewed these students, several that were never my students, but they did end up beating odds and getting through to graduation. And they talked about how they were regarded, how people treated them. Did they see them? Did they pity them? Did they talk about them in negative ways? Or did they regard them with high esteem? That was a huge theme. That's what kept them coming. And if we can keep them coming and keep them engaged, of course they will learn. This is a lack of opportunity. So when we talk about relatedness, I can give you some examples. We had guest speakers. I ended up having guest speakers to my newcomer class, and my class in high school only met a couple of times a week and just as an elective course. And those kids made incredible growth. Even the students that had no literacy in their native language, they made incredible growth because we had already learned a lot. We had learned a lot. So by the time I was teaching high school and I only get to see the kids every other day, we're focusing on these things, and we're focusing on how much are you reading when you're not with me? How much of this are you doing? And do you understand why you're doing what you're doing? So when we talk about relatedness, the example that I have from my classroom, one example is that we would have guest speakers come often, every 3 to 4 weeks. I have videos of students who are so engaged to speak to these guest speakers. What's interesting is whether they're coming over Zoom or whether they're coming face to face, often the guest speakers would say thank you to the students. It's my honor to be here. Just the fact that they're willing to talk to your class gives the class the message that they're important, that they are important, and they are important. So other things about relatedness, we do a social contract. And in the Boosting Achievement book, we quote Capturing Kids' Hearts. That's a company here in Texas, and they show you how to make a social contract. So I cite them because someone showed me how to do this and they learned it from them. And it really, that's not about the rules in my classroom. It's about the relationships. It's about how people want to be treated. And every child needs to contribute to that contract. How do you want to be treated? It doesn't matter that they've never been to school before. It's about how they want to be treated. And then how do we think other people want to be treated? And then how do you want to be treated by the teacher? And then how do you think I want to be treated? All of that goes to relatedness. Does your classroom or your environment or the small group you pull out or your club, is it a place where kids feel respected and are willing to take risks? Is it that safe? Do they honor each other? I know that's hard with teenagers, but it's absolutely possible. It's absolutely possible, but we have to have a focus on that because that's more important than so many other things for how fast someone is going to be able to attend, pay attention. It has everything to do with how they feel in your environment. So the next one I want to talk about is relevancy. Relevancy, I know content teachers hear this a lot. Tell the kids why the math is important, why the science is important. Well, if you know why something should be relevant to you, you're going to be more motivated and engaged in learning about that thing or doing that thing. So again, guest speakers. I can have a restaurant owner in our neighborhood talk to the students about how they use math and how, immigrants and entrepreneurship go hand in hand. So any business owners in your area are fantastic guest speakers, but they also give relevancy for why it's important to stay in school, why it's important, to learn to read and speak the language and use the math and all of that. So that's right there. Some of the things we do hit more than one of these things. But I'm going to show a couple of examples. One is from Dr. Escalante's book, where she tells us to annotate the objectives. We do that every day. And I run my fingers under the objectives as I read them with the class. She has lots of things, lots of reasons why this is important, lots of research, in fact, framing our lesson and why that's so important. But I need the students to understand, when I'm talking about a student who's just gaining literacy and just gaining language, I want them to understand why it's important for their eyes to track the print. I want them to understand, here's an example, the high frequency words that make up half of everything we read. Pick up any book, and about half of it are those teeny tiny words: and, of, is, you, me, my. I need them to understand that's probably their fastest road to getting literacy off the ground. If they know that just trust me, I tell them, trust me, every single day you will understand a little more English. Engaging with us every single day, you'll understand a little bit more. And if your eyes are going across text and you are in a low stress place, you can't help it. You'll start to see words over and over again that you're starting to understand, basic words. So example, today we will. Takes them about a week to recognize today and we and will. And then they look over at the word wall and they see the W. Their eyes need to be in text while they're gaining language. So pointing out to them the relevancy of their eyes going across the text helps me. I don't have students who don't do it. I will every once in a while before they really get the message that this is having a big effect on your language acquisition. And it's going to really help your literacy. So my philosophy is not to give a set of sight words like they do with 5-year-olds in kindergarten. That's effective. But let's remember that those 5-year-olds speak that language. So when you give them 10 high frequency words like I and me and you and my, they use those words. A 5-year-old that speaks English uses those words. So the sight word list out of context has some meaning for that. If you're just gaining, let's say Japanese, you don't speak Japanese, and I try to give you a list out of context, just a list of words, it's going to be very difficult for you to navigate, to make use of it. I'm not saying it won't work. I'm saying it's not the fastest way to gain high frequency words. If we know that high frequency words come up in everything, let's train the students, let's educate the students in that fact. Like make sure they know that so that their eyes go across. And then that sentence is in context. Today we will learn about, they know that every day we're talking about what we're going to do today. When I give them a sentence starter, I'm going to read it. Now let's all read it. It's good for the entire class. But I want the student realizing, oh, there's that word I and me and you. I want the metacognitive awareness. I want them to have the relevancy of why that just the act of tracking the print with your eyes is so important. It's so important because multiple exposures as you gain meaning is how you're going to start recognizing. It's going to boost everything. I need them to have that relevancy. Again, I'm not going to argue with you if you're teaching phonics or whole language or you subscribe to the science of reading. What I'm saying is, how do we get kids more engaged, doing more reading with assistance? And then whatever you're doing is going to work better. No one should argue that a student who is reading more and in print with support, so a book that's read aloud, Google Chrome that will read to me, if my eyes are going across the text and I'm chunking and doing Google images and gaining meaning, that's good. That has to be good. And even let's put literacy aside. Stephen Krashen tells us that it's all about reading. The more they read, the more text they see, the more they're in it, the more minutes a day they're in it, the more language they're going to acquire. Even if we just look at this as second language acquisition, how do we support their reading so that that goes faster? They have to hear all of that for the relevancy. So we can look at relevancy. What I'm saying is I train the students the way I train teachers. Understand the research on how you're going to go faster. The more you do, the more you can do. Here's another great example. Kim Thyberg, who is new to teaching newcomers this year, she heard me say this about high frequency words, and she tweeted out a picture of an article that was a dense article that she's using with her newcomers. And applause, because she's working on claims, evidence, and reasoning with her newcomers. But as part of that lesson, she and the students highlighted all the little bitty high frequency words. So you can see, if you look at this tweet in today's show notes, you can see about half of it is highlighted. So while she's teaching at grade levels, she's also helping build relevancy for students where she wants them to track the print when she reads a paragraph aloud. Her students that have more literacy don't need to do that. But the ones who are just gaining literacy, they just don't have enough words with automaticity and they can't sound out the words on their own, but they can work on claims, evidence, and reasoning. But they still need the relevancy of, you see how half of this is high frequency words. Half of this are words you should be getting and that you can be getting as long as you read with me. Read with me. So kudos to Kim Thyberg. Shout out to you. Now, just yesterday, she tweeted out how in her newcomer classroom, she's got student teachers. She's creating student teachers. She's having students come to the board and do some read aloud. And their other kids are tracking the print and they're all encouraging each other. And she said that was her favorite part of it, is that they're applauding for each other and they're telling each other good job. And they're all brand new kids, but she's created conditions in there. The relatedness, the relationships between the kids are really contributing to success for everyone in the classroom. Okay, so we have talked about relatedness, relevancy. Kim Thyberg was just giving her kids relevancy. And let's talk about competence. Competence is feeling like you're getting better at something. Feeling like you're getting better at something. I love the example of video games for teenagers, because the same kids that will give up in my classroom, and I'm like, oh, they give up so easily. They don't give up on video games. Those same kids, I'm watching them, my own teenagers, they will give up on things that are hard, but they'll sit there at a video game and fail over and over and fail and fail and fail. Why are they not giving up? They're not giving up because they have a sense of competence. They haven't mastered this level, but they feel like they can. And the reason they feel like they can is because they've had little wins. They've had little wins, so they feel like they can figure out this level, like Pac-Man. Let's say you've played Pac-Man before. Well, the Pac-Man's going around eating and it dies, and you don't win that level. But if you find out that if you go right and then left and then right and then left, you get more. Your Pac-Man eats more of the little dots. So you do it again and you do it again. You're building a sense of competence. You feel yourself getting better within that level before you've mastered the level. It helps you feel like you can do it. It's more than a growth mindset. You've had little successes. When was the last time that some of our students had an academic win? We have to create little wins so that they start feeling a sense of competence. A concrete example is that settle down and read free voluntary reading time. I would walk over and listen to like 3 kids during that time, just go to their desk. They would whisper read to me. So that is a time like one-on-one time with them, even though it's just 2 or 3 minutes, I want to use that time to show them growth. I would much rather, if you are pulling small groups with brand new students, build their sense of competence and their metacognitive awareness of how they're gaining language and literacy, and then flood them with things that they can read. And all of them can read with support. But so an example is the first time I ever asked them to read something, a lot of students can't read any of it. I could pick up any book and ask them, can you identify any of the words? I'm using Google Translate, trying to get an idea of what the student can do. And often when they're brand new, they can't do anything. But a couple of weeks later, if they read with me and they're constantly reading with support, a couple of weeks later, they might know a couple of words like thee and I or you. And if they can do that in 2 weeks, if they can point to some words that they can read and identify them, that's growth. That is a formative assessment. I'm not waiting till the day of the test. If I wait till the day of the test, they a lot of times they're not going to pass a test. And then everybody's going to be defeated. But I can show them, well, you will pass those tests someday, as long as you keep moving forward. You see, you're getting better. Every day you're getting better. Let me show you your growth. Let me show you your growth. Even if we don't see growth in the first week, they can't still. I get an idea for what they're reading. If I've given them an opportunity to choose whatever they want to read, I find out that they like airplanes or that they like soccer or whatever they're choosing. There's all kinds of reasons to have these one-on-one conversations. But one of my main goals is to show them some growth. So you can have a spiral with each student has a page in there and just make a few little notes. He can't read anything today. He can't identify any sounds or any words. 2 weeks later, he knows the word the, he knows the word a, he knows the word an, he knows the word you. And I showed him that he is gaining some language and he is gaining some high frequency words. You have to show them growth. 3 months down the line, 6 months down the line, that is not the same student. This is not a disability. They should understand more. Every teacher that's ever worked with a newcomer student will tell you that by the end of the school year, they understand a lot more. Well, yeah, but it doesn't feel like that in the moment. It doesn't feel like we're making that much progress, but we have to show them progress. And we have to realize they are making progress. And so that sense of competence helps you not give up. It gives you hope. You start feeling like, I can do this. I'm getting better at this. Anything, any task that you're trying to accomplish and get better at. Once you start having little wins, it boosts your motivation. It helps your mindset. It gives you hope. Our job is really to give them hope and keep their head in the game and flood them with print. So show them their wins. Make sure they know that how it's relevant. How many minutes a day you read, that's how many words you're going to see in a year. So right there is relevancy for more reading with assistance. Because we're not really talking about comprehension right now, because they work on comprehension with every teacher, every grade level. They can comprehend right now with assistance. They can talk about characters and characterization and why the author wrote this. If I read it aloud to them, if I adapt text for them, if I give it to them in a different way. That's another thing we really need to realize for our own mindset is that students can engage at grade level right now by how I set up the activities, by how much support they get, but how are they building their own ability to decode text? So we have now talked about relatedness, relevancy, competence. And let's talk about the fourth one that's also super important, autonomy. I want to say again that Larry Ferlazzo has written several articles where he goes over these 4 things. He's talking about students in general. He's often talking about English learners. And today I am narrowing it down to a student with interrupted formal education. But as you can see, what I mean is that if this is for the entire class to get motivation from all students, these are the 4 things that we should have in our garden if we want it to grow, if we want motivation to grow. So how important is autonomy? Autonomy means choice. How much choice do they have? And think about yourself for a minute. How motivated are you to do something when you don't have the choice, when you don't have any choice. So you chose to listen to this podcast or watch this video. You chose to, probably. If you did choose to do it, you're probably more motivated than if I would have said, you know what, today we're going to talk about English learners, but I'm going to tell you which one to do. I'm not saying that that can't work. I'm saying motivation is increased when you choose something about it. So we can offer choice in different ways. We can offer, don't kill yourself because you can't offer choice in everything, but here are examples. You can offer them choice in how they work. Let's say you're going to have them read a paragraph or read a chapter. Do they want the audio version? Do they have an electronic version where Google Chrome will read it to them? But I'm asking them to annotate the text, chunk and annotate, chunk and make little notes. Or you can have the choice of reading it with a friend. But one of you is doing the read aloud and the other one is tracking the print and suggesting annotations. You're still chunk, talk, chunk, annotate. And remember, your eyes, if you're not the one reading the words, your eyes should go across the text. Another thing is they could read with me. They could come to my desk and I have a group where I'm reading aloud, but I want them to track the print and we're still going to chunk and annotate. They may want to translate, use their translator. I'm going to encourage them not to translate everything, but if they do need to translate big chunks, come back to the English and then have it read. Once you understand it or get the gist because you translated something, come back to the English and then track the print. Chunk, annotate, be exposed to the English text. And again, the most restrictive might be some students that have to do it with me and we're doing just a version of it, just images and a few sentences. But that is differentiated, but we're all working in the same thing. We're all working in The Great Gatsby, or we're all working in Lord of the Flies, or whatever we're doing. We're all working in science over the same chapter on chemical reactions. But did they have any choice? Choice in how they do it, but then also maybe choice in how they give it back to me. But really, one of the most important pieces, if you want students' language acquisition to go as fast as possible, is that they have choice in what they read on their own time. Do you have any free voluntary reading time? Like I said, we only had like 6 to 8 minutes a day. But every day they gave me an opportunity to remind them that you should be reading outside of class. And the more that you read, even with support, the faster your language is going to go. So they need to be flooded with choice on that reading. So choice, we see so many choice boards and things out there because choice is so important for motivation. I'm going to shift to talk about those two things that I have mentioned that actually hit all of these. They hit the relatedness, the relationships, relevancy, competence, and choice, autonomy. So the first one I'm going to talk about is news in levels. News in levels, I've done a whole podcast on this, and I will make sure that you have links to the podcast because I have a little video in there that will help you explain to the students how to use news in levels. The reason I love news in levels is because it requires no login. It requires no teacher. Our kids are a transient population. So they may be deported, they may move, they may go to a different school. So I need them to know very early in the game how important this website is to their language acquisition, how it is scaffolded for them, and how they can level up within the same article and how they need to level up. So I have that 5-minute video. I have how to use news in levels. But the reason that it is so powerful is because it hits, I feel that it hits all of these things. First of all, it goes to relationships because when students are using it, I'm seeing what they're choosing. If they keep choosing articles about animals and things like that, that helps my relationship with them. Also, because I am training them on how to use all 3 levels. See, these are news articles. News in Levels has hundreds of news articles and new ones every day. And it is the real news. But it has level 1, level 2, and level 3. And it's also read aloud to them over YouTube. So most of our families have access to YouTube. And if they do this, if they have anybody in the house has a smartphone, and over 80% of our homes have smartphones, over 90% of our homes have cell phones. But again, they can come in before and after school. They can do this in the library. They can do this in my classroom. News in levels goes to relatedness because I'm giving them the message. I'm holding them in high regard, and I'm giving them the message that they can help themselves level up. They can increase their ability to read text on their own using this site. So I'm holding them in high regard. But I have to show them how to do that. I don't want them picking level 1 and then going to another level 1 and then going to another level 1 article. I want them to use the same article that they chose and go through level 1, level 2, and level 3 while they're sitting, before they go to another article. It doesn't take that long. So it hits relatedness because I'm showing the students that I feel that they can do it. It goes to, and we do it all together as a class multiple times where we vote on an article so that I can show them how to use it. But I'm telling them, I know you can do this on your own. I know you can do this on your own. So then relevancy. It's relevant to them because I've already trained them on how their eyes need to go across the text. They understand the relevancy. Also, that they understand that level 1 is in the present tense and it's short sentences and it's read aloud, so it's easier to get the gist. Stay in level 1 until you comprehend what this short paragraph is about. But then you need to go to level 2. Now that verbs are in the past tense, structures of language, longer sentences. Then level 3, it's very complex, but they're not struggling with level 2 or level 3. They're just seeing new language. They already understood the article. We took comprehension off the table. Now it's just about the ability to decode text and hear more higher structures of language. So much relevancy when we explain this to them in that way. So they have the relevancy for why they need to track the print. They have the relevancy for how they're acquiring the language. And it's relevant to them because when they choose it, it's relevant. It's by nature relevant because they chose the article. So if they chose an article about forest fires or global warming, it's because they care about that thing. So it's relevant by nature. Now, it's also competence. Again, we're helping them level up. We're helping them, without me, be able to level up to level 2 and level 3 if they have the awareness of how this is working. All 3 levels are read aloud to them, and I just want them to understand how they're getting better. If they do news in levels for as many minutes as they can a day, of course they're going to see more high frequency words. Of course they're going to start having little wins when I show them to them. So of course I can help them build a sense of competence. This website, this free website, helps them build their competence in just hearing, understanding, and recognizing English text and the English language. Autonomy. News in levels is all about autonomy because they can choose. They can choose the article they want to read. This is why it is so important that we don't grab those articles and give them to them. You can do that in your class time, but they need free, this doesn't require a login. This is a free website where anybody can just go to newsinlevels.com and see hundreds of articles that are leveled. And so they need the autonomy. They need to be flooded with text that they can read and that is scaffolded for them when I'm not around. Because if they didn't choose it, they may abandon it because they're bored with it. But if they chose it, you're going to be more interested. You're going to be more interested when I let you choose what you want to read in your free time. We all are. So we need to make sure that we remember that a website like newsinlevels.com doesn't require any teacher login or student login and gives them the ability to level up themselves. It goes to relatedness, relevancy, competence, and autonomy. Now, I don't recommend news in levels for the little bitty students because the news can be scary. But I do recommend it to their parents. It is a fantastic website so that parents at home, whether they speak English or not, whether they're literate or not, can choose an article with their child to hear and track the print and read with their child at home. It's fantastic. Giving the parents the sense of competence, helping the parents gain English. It's fantastic. Okay, and the other one I have mentioned a couple of times, I think Noah Daniel, Building Outside the Blocks. Her choice projects are done in a way where students choose when they will present. And they choose what or how they're going to present often. So there's a lot of choice. I give what they're going to present on, but even if you give them the project, they can choose when they're going to be doing it over the grading period. There's not a day that we do projects, because she has a good point. Poor kid that's like the 7th or 8th kid to go. No, I have a calendar out there in this grading period, and you can tell me what day you are ready to present, and you get to give a 5-minute commercial break to my instruction. This is brilliant. This changed everything for us. Kids loved these 5-minute commercial breaks. So I would always take like 2, maximum of 3 choice projects a day to be presented. I always presented my own first. So let's say I choose the one about my name. What's in a name? That's directly from Noah Daniels' Building Outside the Blocks website. What's in a name? I had to research my name. I had to talk to relatives. Why did I get named this? What all can I find out about my name? First, middle, last name. And then I present this project. I have all these sentence frames and paragraph frames and things for the students to be able to do the research, to present. And they also have to analyze, is this a good name for me? So think about when I do mine for the class, that's relatedness. I'm telling them about myself. Whenever they do their choice projects, they're telling us about themselves. So relatedness and relationships is right there. Then relevancy. Choice projects are relevant by nature. They chose what they wanted to talk about. Some of them say, I don't want to do any of these projects, but can I talk about parkour? Can I talk about soccer? Yes. And remember, we're getting a big bang for a buck because they're practicing and practicing and practicing and practicing. Once they get the English, they can do the rough draft however they want. You can use the paragraph frames, but I'm going to go over and check what they are going to present. So then they read it and reread it and reread it to be able to present it to the class. I want to be able to point to any word. I want you to be able to tell me any word before you present, because I want you to get these words with automaticity. I want you to be able to recognize these words in other places. So it's building their sense of competence, the reading and rereading, but it's something that they're interested in. And again, they had the autonomy. This is a choice project. They either had the autonomy of what to present on or how to present it or when to present it. Our students would say over and over again that these 5-minute commercial breaks, these projects, were their favorite part of the year, where they learned about each other. It really goes to classroom culture. It's beautiful. And so I'm going to include a video of a student. Her name is Natalia, and she's doing her personal playlist. Again, straight from Noah Daniels' work, the personal playlist project, where you get 3 songs about yourself. One is nostalgic, one is about you, and one is a pick-me-up or a motivator. And she's talking about Venezuela and her country, and her songs are beautiful. But it gives your students, once you do a project, a 5-minute project presentation, and once they see Natalia's, and this is just a 2-minute video, it says clips of hers, they understand what we're doing. We're telling about ourselves, and we have all of these things. I'm going to give you a Padlet full of those kinds of projects, Word documents that you can download that have the paragraph frames and ideas for multiple projects. I'll give you my rapid literacy Padlet in today's show notes that has so many. So we really appreciate Noah letting us use those projects and putting paragraph frames and sentence frames around them so that the students can do them more easily. So I bet you will want those show notes, because not only am I giving you all of those resources to people like Larry Ferlazzo, links to his books and articles, and Dr. Lora Beth Escalante's work, and Daniel Pink, and the Padlet, and these resources by Noah Daniel, and everything that I've talked about. Our new book, DIY PD, A Guide to Self-Directed Learning for Educators of Multilingual Learners. That book is out now, and I have a free chapter download for you at the bottom of today's show notes. So definitely check that out. Shout out to my co-authors, Ton Nguyen and Dr. Katie Topple. So read the first chapter for free. People are loving it. You can find today's show notes at the short link, bit.ly/BA podcast. All in capital letters. Type that into your browser and you are looking for episode 103. So one more time, I want to thank the teachers that I'm working with on an ongoing basis. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for stretching my thinking. You're adding so much to my learning. And I want to thank you, whatever capacity you work in education. I just want to lift you up and thank you. It is an incredibly difficult time. So I hope this has been helpful. I'm sending you positive vibes. Take good care. Bye-bye.